And welcome to Wild Bill's Media and the Arts podcast. And today we're going to talk about an author. Um, I think the greatest author of all time, and that's Edgar Allan Poe. And we're also going to talk about how Edgar Allan Poe's had an influence in my writing. And I'm going to give you just a few facts on Poe, and then I'm going to talk about his influence on my life and my opinions of Edgar Allan Poe and all that. Um, Poe was born in Boston, Massachusetts, January the 19th, 1809. And he, lived in poverty most of his life, um, especially as a published writer. And in January of 1845, he published A Raven, and The Raven was the poem that made him famous. But the problem was he really didn't make much money off of it. Back then, the copyright laws were way different from where they were now, and especially the international copyright laws. And so that once someone got published, they only had to pay him one time for it, and then it would get published a bunch of different times, and he wouldn't get paid for them. And then um, Annabel Lee, another one of his famous poems, was the last complete poem that he ever written. Was published in 1849, shortly right after his death. Um, Annabel Lee was probably one of the greatest, if not the greatest, I think, love poem of all time. And it was inspired, I think, by the death of his wife, Virginia Clem. Edgar Allan Poe had a lot of stories that just stories and poems that stick out in people's mind, like The Mask of the Red Death, um, The Pit and the Pendulum, The Black Cat, The Telltale Heart, Murders in the Rue Morgue, Mask of the Red Death. Um, you can name a bunch. His poems like The Raven, Annabel Lee, To Helen, Dream Within a Dream, Bells. I mean, he actually even created a word in there. I think it was something tabulation or something like that was actually a word he created for that poem, and then it actually later become a word. And but Poe died at only 40 years of age, and I sit back and I think just what he could have done if he would have lived to be an older man. If he would have lived to have been, let's say, 60, 70 years old, um, I honestly think what else could he have brought us? I mean, you kind of take a look at it like the Mask of the not Mask of the Red Death, but Murders in the Rue Morgue was a detective story, and some believe that that was the basics that where Sherlock Holmes came from. After that story was so successful, they believe that that's where the creation of Sherlock Holmes come from. Whether that's really true or not, that's debatable. But I mean, Poe wrote just things that people wasn't writing at the time, and he was the father of the modern short story. And actually, I think the creator of the short story, because he would always write his stories and publish them in little like magazines or papers or whatever. And but Poe become famous because of the Raven, but he's more famous now than he ever was then. And I actually read up that he was actually really famous overseas, especially in like London and places like that. Um, Poe had a unique style. Poe was one of those authors that just he could draw you in by the way he wrote and the way he would create a story and just kind of pull you into the thing and make you believe that you were there. Some people would disagree on the statement I'm fixing to say, and that's fine because everybody has their own opinion. But I believe Edgar Allan Poe was a literary genius. And the reason I say that is because Poe, the words that he used, the way he structured his sentences, the way he wrote his stories and his poems. I mean, a lot of his poems read like stories. He was real good at, at just bringing you into his world. And Poe was a broken man. I mean, he watched his wife and mother die of tuberculosis, and that was the basic of a lot of his problems. And um, some of his poems were pretty much based on those things. Poe died in Baltimore, um, October 3rd, in 1849. He was found delirious on a bench, mumbling. Took him to the hospital, and pretty much died a few days later. Um, but the thing that gets me is that, you know, just what he could have done in more time if he had it. Poe was great at prose poem, and I've wrote a few prose poems myself. And Poe has been a huge influence in my writing career. Um, Poe was probably the author that got me into writing. His stuff just, um, to me, I honestly believe Poe was ahead of his time. I believe he was just what can you say? I mean, his stuff is just so great. And no matter what people might say, and whether people at those times would admit it, but I'm pretty sure that people like Arthur Rimbaud and even Bram Stoker and some of them other people had to be influenced by Poe. I mean, how couldn't you not have been? I mean, I think still to this day he's considered the greatest writer of all time. And I know I may get flack for some of that, but I really don't care. That's my opinion and I have a right to it. But I have become an independent author, and I just released a new book called Finding Myself Again. And it's a collection of poems that I have worked on over 20 years now. And I had published them in 3 separate volumes and then finally put them all together in one. And I never thought a million years, if you would have asked me 20 years ago if I would be a published writer, I would have told you no. I think maybe even 10 years ago, if you would have asked me if I would be a published writer, I probably would have told you no. But here I am, and I'm a published writer. And Edgar Allan Poe is the biggest reason that I'm a writer. I mean, and I'm also influenced by Stephen King, which King is a big influence in my career. Some other writers like Louis L'Amour, Larry Murtry, Elmore Leonard, Craig Johnson, who wrote the Walt Longmire series. There's some other writers out there too, but probably King and Poe were the 2 biggest influences I have. I know that someday I know that I'll never be a New York Times best-selling author. I mean, I've heard a lot of people tell me that my stuff is good, but I'll never be a King or I'll never be a Poe. I'll never be in their league. I wish I could be, but I know that I won't. Um, Poe um, is a lot in a way. I mean, I don't really make money off my writing, at least not that much anyway. And I believe that even if Poe would have never made a dime off of writing, he still would have done it anyway. Um, and to me, it's about the art. It's about touching people in a sense to where I want them to get the same thing I got out of when I first read my first book, when I picked up a book for the first time to read it. You know, to be brought into a world, into someone's mind of a story that they've created, and to engage a person or whatever and have them hooked for 100 pages, 200 pages, 300 pages, or if it's just a poem and it's, 5 or 6, 7 stanzas or something. If you can intrigue them and bring them and take them somewhere else they've never been, that's what it's all about. I remember a few years ago when I was in college and I had become a member of the Creative Writing Club. And it wasn't long after that I had published my first poetry book called Restless Spirit. And I remember at the time walking out of the club one day, and the club president asked me, says, well, have you sold any of your books? Are you making any money as a writer? And I said, no, not really. I said, I've sold a few copies here and there, but not that many. He says, well, I said, but that's not what it's about. And he goes, well, ain't that what it's about? Writing to get famous and become rich and stuff like that. And I looked at him and I said, if that's the reason I become a writer, then I'm doing it for all the wrong reasons. It's not about the money. It's not about fame. It's not about fortune. It's about changing people's lives. If someone reads a poem of mine or a story of mine and it influences them or encourages them to pick up a pen and become a writer, then I felt like I have done my job. To me, that's worth more than 10 million copies of a book sold. I'm not going to lie. Would it be nice someday to know that I had a New York Times bestseller and made some money as a published author? Sure. But either way, I'm still going to write. Either way, I'm still going to publish books because that's what I am. That's what I do. I love writing because writing is not only a therapy for me, but I love creating stories that people want to read. I love taking people to a different place that maybe they have never gone before, or throw an idea to them that, oh man, I've never seen something like this. Or when you've got them drawn in and you have them in the palm of your hands and you got them engaged in a story, and all of a sudden, bam, you turn the script on them and something happens that they didn't even see coming. And they're like, oh my God, I couldn't believe, the how that happened, or believe how you turn it on them like that. That right there is what makes it worth it. That is worth being a writer. Same feeling I got when I read some of the earlier books that I read. Um, I have been to the Edgar Allan Poe Museum in Richmond, Virginia, and someday, um, I would love to go to Baltimore and visit the grave of Poe and have my picture taken at his grave site there. because Poe is, to me, one of the most influential writers of all time. I mean, I think maybe his works are more noticeable than any other writer out there. And what can you say? I mean, the stuff that he done in the 40 years that he was alive, and I mean, really, the most of his stuff come in the later years of his life. Um, I'm just baffled of what he accomplished in such short time, and makes me think and wonder what could he have done if he'd have lived another 20 years, maybe 30 years, hell, even 10 years. You know what I'm saying? What he could have brought us. I mean, he brought us so much in such a short period of time that um, it just blows my mind. Um, like I said, I think Poe is the greatest of all time. And I think Poe is a literary genius. And that's my opinion. And everybody has a right to their own. But if you want to be a writer, Stephen King once said that to become a better writer, the more books you read, the better writer you become. And I believe that. And I would say that if you want to be a writer, sit down and study Poe. Study his works, study his poems, his short stories. See how he writes, his style, the words he uses. You won't regret it. I mean, Poe was, like I said, ahead of his time. Um, I'll stand by that decision. You know, no matter what, I'll stand by that opinion, and that's pretty much it. But this picture that I have display on the screen here, I could have picked another picture by Poe, but it's one of my favorites, and I think it kind of tells it all. Poe was um, he was a man of mystery, and his death was a mystery. And still to this day, it kind of baffles people of what really happened to him. And I think if you kind of look back to it, maybe Poe is somewhere laughing, going, "Hey, even in death, I'm a mystery," and maybe that's a cool thing. I really don't know, but I know that he's had an impound um effect on my writing career and even parts of my life. I won't deny that. Poe was a man of mystery and a man of a kind of darkness. All the things he went through in his life, and I've been through a lot of trials and tribulations myself. Some of it comes out of my writing, and I guess that's one of the things me and Poe have in common. I guess, but like I said, if you want to be a writer, I suggest you read some Poe, maybe some King or something like that, um, and just study their works. And maybe they'd influence you to pick up a pen and be a writer. And if you happen to ever pick up one of my books and it influenced you to become a writer, then my job is done, and that'll make me more happier than any other thing. I just kind of want to give you an insight of me and my influence and Edgar Allan Poe. And I hope you enjoy this episode, and rest in peace, Poe. We just celebrated his 212th birthday, and Poe, his legacy will always live on, and if not through other people, it definitely will through me. And so, happy birthday, late birthday, Poe, and that's pretty much it. That's all I have for this episode, and This is Wild Bill signing out of the rubble with of the Wild Bill's Meeting the Arts podcast. You have a good day and a blessed day. Thank you.